Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Lana Broussard, and welcome to my demo for my English Language Arts lesson today. This will be for high school, grade 9, and the lesson is on analyzing or how to analyze a poem. All right, so I will share my screen and we will get started. Okay, so here I have the agenda with the introduction to the lesson. How do we analyze poetry? And again, we are going to be practicing. The students will have a copy of this poem by Robert Frost, and they will also have a worksheet to do as part of the lesson, which I have a copy of on my PowerPoint. The learning objective here is to better understand poetry by learning to decipher the author's meaning and intentions. So again, we will have the PowerPoint. We will introduce and discuss 9 steps to analyze poetry. They will listen to the poem with a video of the poetry reading. They will analyze this poem. And in a group, they will compose answers to the worksheet and answer the question among themselves. And for closure, we would have a comparison of answers around class on what students think this poem means. The exit slip would be to rewrite one of the lines in the last section of the poem using 3 adjectives of their own. So that is what we will be doing today. Okay. So I have the standard. This would fall under analyzing the structure, prosody and graphic elements such as line length and word position in poems across a variety of poetic forms. And the essential question again is, how do we analyze poetry? All right, boys and girls, it is nice to see you in class today. Today, we are going to work more with analyzing poetry. We've already discussed it briefly, but today we are going to focus on some steps that you need, and you will practice this with a poem by the poet Robert Frost, Stopping in the Woods on a Snowy Evening. So number 1, the first step, if you're given a poem, maybe it's on a test or in class and you don't have any frame of reference, the first thing to do is not be overwhelmed. Okay. There's no trickery in a poem. Some, yes, I agree, some are more difficult to understand than others, but don't be afraid of it. Now, you likely won't understand the first time you read the poem. You won't understand everything. But as you read it, and you always need to read a poem more than once, this builds the discovery process, and it's very necessary to understanding a poem. Okay, you won't always get everything, and that's okay. The second step to analyze poetry is to read the title of the poem. That is going to be, of course, a big key to what this is about. Read the title and then stop and think about it and consider it. Consider it just a bit before you start reading the poem. The third step is to read the poem all the way through and don't stop. Keep going, even if something isn't quite clear, okay? Keep going. You're reading to get a general idea of the poem's meaning. You can dig deeper into the details of the more difficult passages later. For now, the goal is to get an idea of what's going on in the passage. We call that a gist. Notice that the G sounds like J. It's a central idea or the essence of the poem. Now, after you read it once, read it again, but this time annotate. Now, if you recall, we have annotated some, and just to remind you, this is to underline, highlight, or write your own comments next to things. Next to anything that you really like, that reminds you of something else, like an allusion that you think is interesting, that you find confusing, that you think might be important, even if you don't know exactly why. Okay? Any of those things you could annotate. Okay? Underline, highlight. The fifth step in analyzing poetry is to look up any words you don't know. If you don't know the meaning of one or two words, you might not be able to understand as much, or you might not be able to get this at all. It's important to note that poets use very limited words. Poets are very mindful of the words that they choose. And here's a hint. Every word matters in a poem. We call this word economy. They don't just use any words. Okay, so keep that in mind. Number 6, identify the narrator of the poem. A lot of times we want to think that the poem is about the poet himself or herself, and that's not necessarily the case. The poem may or may not be about the poet or the poet's life or anything. So try to figure out who is speaking in the poem. What do you know about the narrator? What is the narrator's tone? How does the narrator influence the poem's message or theme? Who is speaking in the poem? Very important. Number 7, note any shifts or changes. Is there a switch? Does the narrator use a hinge word? These are important. A hinge word such as but, hold on. Okay, a hinge word such as but, however. This could change the meaning or the momentum of the poem. Pay special attention to the idea that comes immediately after one of those hinge words. These hinge words might signal the meaning or the bigger meaning in a poem. Okay, these are very important. Number 8, clear these drawings. Number 8, figure out the structure of the poem. Now, I've given you an example of a poem that does have some structure. You know, it's spaced out, it kind of goes down, there's a lot of white space. Now, the older poems that we will study don't so much use this, but the more modern ones definitely use layout as a big key. But for this, the structure of the poem, what is interesting about the rhyme scheme? Now, we will be able to see a rhyme scheme in this chosen poem for today. What's interesting about the meter of the lines? How do they sound? And we will also go more into meter. What about the physical layout of the text? Now you can see that again in this poem, not so much with the one that we're going to work today. Same way with the white space. This poem has a lot of white space. We don't have that with the one that we're working on. And then if you do encounter a poem with all of this, you would think, how might these elements contribute to the poem's overall message or theme? Because that's important also. Number 9, the last step. Finally, read the poem one more time. So now we have 1, 2, 3 times, a good amount of time to read a poem. Read it aloud if you possibly can. Again, if you're taking a test and you're having to work with a poem on a test, you won't have that option in class. But if you're at home or alone, yes, definitely. Read the poem out loud. See how it sounds to your ears. What's the new meaning or insight that you can now see in the work once you read it aloud? All right. So here is the poet that we are going to be working with today. You can see that for you, he lived a while ago, okay, 1874 to 1963. And this is Robert Frost. He is one of the most famous and well-known poets in American history. He has written some of what many people would say some of the best poetry that we have. Okay. We are going to be first listening to the poem and make sure that you're following along. You can make any annotations on there that you like while you're listening to the poem.
Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and the frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
Okay. All right, so that is the poem by Robert Frost. All right, so take a look at your copy. The first thing you do, what is the first thing you do? Yes, look at the title and consider it. So you should have a note there. Put a note there. Stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Is this a good time to stop? Was it planned? What do you think? Okay, now let's go and look at the first part. Whose woods are these? I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. Okay, those sounds have a wonderful kind of musical quality, and we will talk about the beat of a poem later on. There are some rhymes. but we are looking at the meaning. Why is he there? Whose woods are they? Would that person mind the traveler being there? What are your thoughts? Why is he sitting there watching for a bit? The woods fill up with snow. The next part, my little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, ah, the darkest evening of the year. Okay, so is the horse, how does the horse feel? It's a little out of the ordinary for the horse to stop there. And the darkest evening of the year. What do you think about that? Should he be going home? Okay, let's consider that. Can you get a picture in your mind? How is the atmosphere there? All right, the next stanza is more about the horse. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Okay, so how is it out there in the woods? Yes, it's quiet. He's alone. Ah, there is solitude. Okay. Do you think he enjoys that, he or she, the traveler? Why is he there? What do you think? Okay. Is this out of the ordinary again for the horse? Are they near home or are they far away? What do you think? All right, and the last lines are some of the most famous in the English literature canon. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but what is this word called? Anybody? What is that? Hinge word. Yes, you remembered. Good. So what's happening here? A shift. Yes, there's a shift. But I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Okay, wow. So that we have this wonderful description of the woods. How does that line make you feel? Okay. Maybe comforting. Okay. All right. Maybe interested in something. Okay. And then there's that shift. What does this mean? I have promises to keep. He has things to do. Okay. Responsibilities, good. Yes. Maybe he has a family or someone that he has to take care of. Okay, so he's not going to stay in the woods, right? Right. Okay, good. And miles to go before I sleep. Why is that repeated? Think about that for a minute. Think about that. Oh, he's tired. Yes, he might be tired. That's true. He has a lot of things to do. Yes, that's true. It could be, but it's repeated. So really consider that because the poet wanted to say that twice. How do you think he feels the emotions? Or, excuse me, the narrator wanted to say that twice. And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Mhm. All right. So think about that. Look at your worksheet now. Okay, on your worksheet, you're going to get into your groups. Let's go ahead and get into your group of 4. All right. So you should already have something for the title. So make sure you have that down. Okay. The second thing you will do today in your own words, about 3 or 4 sentences, after you read the poem one more time, write a brief summary of the poem and try to list some of the nouns. Nouns, verbs, and phrases that you think are important, that really speak to you here, okay? Nouns, verbs, phrases that are important in understanding the poem. Use some of those in your response. And then the last thing you will do on your worksheet, what do you think the poem means? You're going to write again 3 or 4 sentences about what you think the poem means. Look at here, you want to look at these questions. Okay, who is the subject of the poem? What is he or she speaking about? What is the poet's attitude? And why do you think the author wrote the poem? Those are the questions that you're going to consider when you write your response as to what the poem means. Okay. And when you finish that, we will go ahead and do the exit ticket for today. The very last thing you will do before class ends is examine that line, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep," and rewrite it with your choice to describe the woods, the 3 adjectives that you would choose. So you would more or less fill in the blank. The woods are, da, da, and da. Okay. All right, let's get busy and finish our assignment. Okay, so that would conclude my lesson for today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present it, and I hope you have a nice day. Thank you.